Hey guys, it's me, Halloween Dan, doing a video today that's on a theme that we've done before, but a little bit different at the exact same time, getting a little bit spooky again. Before we get into anything else, guys, if I could just ask you to hit that subscribe and notify button, hit like, and give us a comment in the comment section if you can, because it just helps me out no end. I've got my pals with me, Frank and Jerry, why not? But I think Frank and Jerry might find this next little story a little bit scary, because that's exactly what we're talking about today. I'm going back down the paranormal theme, which is something I'm really into, and we're going to talk about some ghost stories. You only have to have watched a couple of my videos to know that I'm really into the paranormal. I love a good ghost story, I love a good myth, I love a good legend. However you want to categorize them, it doesn't matter, I really like them. And the next story I'm going to tell is probably one of the weirdest ghost stories I've ever heard, and that in itself makes me really interested in it. So let's get into this. So this isn't one of my ghost stories. I've done ghost stories before, but they were my own personal ghost stories. This is a ghost story that exists. This is something you can Google, you'll go and find it. It is a real legend, as it were. But it is really weird. It is the weirdest ghost story / legend you'll probably ever hear. I remember the first time I ever heard it, I was both terrified and completely perplexed by it, because it is bizarre, like really bizarre. So without any further ado, let's just get into this story. The story is called The Hairy Hands of Dartmoor. So immediately you're like, what the hell does that mean? So Dartmoor, if you don't know, is a part of the UK. It's in Devon, which is in the southwest of the UK. Very myth-filled, very legend-filled, spooky as anything. And Dartmoor, as its name suggests, is a moorland. It's a national park as well. It's very beautiful, but beautiful in a kind of an eerie, ancient kind of a way. There are lots of stories and folklore things in that part of the world anyway. And this is just like an added one. What makes this one stand out head and shoulders for me above many of the others is that actually many of the events that are documented around this particular ghost story or legend are relatively recent. 100 years ago, 1920s, were the sort of the peak of this sort of phenomenon, whatever you want to classify it as. These events sort of were mentioned all the way back to like 1910, but it was 1921 when the first real documented event took place. The part of Dartmoor we're talking about is a section of road, and it's a section of road called the B3212. Not particularly mythical sounding, but that's its official name, the B3212, a piece of road that runs between the villages of Postbridge and Two Bridges. So in June 1921, you have a doctor called Dr. E.H. Helby, who's on a motorcycle with his two daughters in the passenger side of the motorcycle, one of those little things that they have. And they're riding along this section of road when all of a sudden the doctor struggles to control the motorcycle. He can't keep control of the motorcycle. The handlebars are being pulled out from under him. And he manages to shout to his daughters, "I can't control the motorcycle, jump." And the daughters jump out of the motorcycle, and though they are injured, they survive. Unfortunately, Dr. Helby himself doesn't survive the accident, but the daughters later recount that it wasn't so much that there was a malfunction with the bike, it was as though their father couldn't control the bike, as if something was trying to pull control out from under him. They never mention any hairy hands in this account, but then in the same year, a little later on in the year, a British Army captain driving along the exact same section of road has the exact same thing happen to him. He's on a motorcycle himself, he loses control. He can't control the motorcycle. Something is trying to pull him off the road. And after he crashes, but he's fine, he wakes up, he accounts that there were two hairy hands. So this is where the story gets really bizarre. So what the captain says is that while he's trying to steer his motorcycle, he feels something trying to pull him off the road, and the motorcycle starts to lurch and lose control. And all of a sudden he looks down, and what he sees over the top of his own hands are two disembodied, hairy hands, really big, muscular, hairy hands. And they're gripping onto his hands and purposely trying to move the bike's handlebars so that he swerves off the road, which eventually he ends up doing. And this is the first real account of the hairy hands of Dartmoor. Up until that point, people had said that there were lots and lots of accidents happened along this stretch of road, and people would sort of crash for no apparent reason. But this is the first time that it ever was sort of the story of these hairy hands was ever told. But without a doubt, the weirdest of all the stories to do with the hairy hands of Dartmoor takes place in 1924. And I think this is probably the most famous story of the hairy hands of Dartmoor, because this one has something a little bit more sinister about it. Not that something trying to pull you off the road is not sinister enough. So in 1924, a husband and wife have pulled over for the evening in a caravan, and they'd pulled over for the evening and they had settled in to go to sleep. And as they were sleeping, the wife suddenly awoke and she felt like something wasn't right, as though she was being watched. Now, everyone's had that weird sensation when they've been woken up suddenly, like as if you've been watched or something. But she said that because of the angle that she was lay at, she was just happened to be looking at a back window in this particular caravan, and she thought she saw something move. So when she looked a little closer, what she saw struck terror into her soul, because what she saw was a disembodied hairy hand climbing up the glass, inching its way up the window of the caravan towards where they had it open just ever so slightly, inching towards where there was a gap in the window. Now, if that's not a terrifying image, I don't know what is. A disembodied hand covered in hair crawling up the glass of your caravan whilst you've been asleep. Pretty terrifying stuff. For some reason, this is the 1920s, the wife felt the need to do the sign of the cross, and apparently the hand then dropped off the window and scurried away. And she closed the window, and they did spend the rest of the night in relative peace, apparently, because she said a prayer or one thing and another. But she was still pretty scared, and then apparently though they were kind of doing a tour of Dartmoor and all the areas of Devon, apparently she wouldn't go on the moor again, and they wouldn't walk on the moor after dark and all that kind of stuff. After that event in 1924, there are lots of other accidents that take place, people reporting the same thing, of feeling as though their steering wheel was out of their control and being pulled off the road. But no real accounts of the actual hairy hands. And it seems to be one of those local legends where anyone who has happened to experience it has either been a little bit embarrassed about it and has chosen to sort of take the event to their grave, or have told people literally as they're on their deathbeds so that they don't have to answer any further questions about it, because it's kind of really spooked them for the rest of their lives. The most recent account probably was only about 20 years ago. Apparently, a local guy, a builder, was stuck in traffic one day, and he decided to take a shortcut, go down this particular stretch of road, the B3212. The same sort of story as has happened for generations by this point happens, where he feels as if he's trying to be pulled off the road. He thought at one point he saw somebody stood by the side of the road and felt a feeling of fear, and as if he was being followed or watched, and he couldn't explain. And eventually he does start to be pulled off the road, and as he looks down at the steering wheel, sees these hairy hands gripping onto the steering wheel, trying to pull the steering wheel in the opposite direction to what he's trying to pull it towards. And eventually he ends up sort of not crashing fully, missing a tree, and sort of ending up on an embankment, which is pretty bad. But he apparently didn't recount this tale until he was pretty much dying, and only recounted it then so that he didn't have to answer any further questions about it. So I don't know, you can read into that however you want. This is just one of those stories that is so bizarre and so creepy, the idea of disembodied hairy hands trying to maliciously endanger and hurt people. That's kind of spooky and scary, isn't it? That takes the whole ghost story thing to a whole other level. And over the years, there's been lots of other reports. People have tried to figure out what these hairy hands are, what they're actually about, who they belong to. There's been everything from, oh, well, they're the hairy hands of an ex-convict that escaped from Dartmoor prison. Oh, or they're just someone who died in a road accident, perhaps. There was stories of a Bronze Age village that existed nearby, and maybe it was a villager who was kind of angry at the road disturbing their resting peace. Evil dark beasts, just, you know, demons. And then there was a gunpowder factory nearby and a guy apparently accidentally sparked some gunpowder, blew up, he died, and all they ever found of him were his hands, which just happened to be quite hairy. And then ever since they've said, oh well, it's him getting his revenge for dying such a ridiculous death. I don't know much about the myth in terms of how relevant it is into the modern day, but for me it is very spooky. It's a spooky story. It's very different from the sort of ghost stories you usually hear. Most ghost stories, you know, oh, it's a grey lady on the stairs, or oh, it was a person looking out of a window but there was nobody there, you know, them kind of stories. Then you have this, which is like two disembodied hairy hands, like Thing from the Addams Family, you know, like trying purposely to pull people off the road and cause an accident. That's kind of something altogether different, isn't it? I think that's why I like it so much. It's kind of spooky. And I think one day, if I ever get the chance, I actually think I would like to drive down that section of road, maybe even after dark, just to see what happened. Though I have to say, I don't think I'd really want to crash. But, you know, just out of interest more than anything. Anyway, guys, thank you for watching. Please hit that subscribe button if you get the chance. And I will see you all soon. Keep it spooky. Bye.